Joe, today we have Tim Lupinacci, and here is why he is awesome. He's the chairman and chief executive officer of Baker Donelson, one of the largest law firms in the US. He serves on the firm's diversity committee and previously served as co-chair of Baker Donelson's Women's Initiative Pathways to Leadership Committee. And he's here today to talk about how we have an influence over more traditional work cultures. Hello, Tim.
Hey, Russell, it's great to be here with you.
Thanks for being here. We were talking right before we pushed the record button about how you have a very different perspective on maybe influencing culture, because we talk about culture all the time. And as a listener of the show, I'm a big fan of definitions, but we keep throwing out culture all the time. But culture is so many different things to so many people. And you come from the law industry, which is, I don't know if you know this, Tim, but pretty inflexible. It's his reputation, or pretty rigid, or not, or very traditional. So super interested to get into all that. However, Tim, you're not off the hook. I have to ask the question I ask all of my guests, which is, what is your best or worst employee experience?
Yeah, Russell, I really look forward to talking about my profession because it is a really interesting dynamic and interesting things I've learned. But so you talked about the legal profession. Literally stumbled into the law practice because I was like you. I don't know about your undergrad, but what you were doing previously, I was a mass comm major in college. I wanted to do radio and television. And I was interning for a TV station my junior year of college. It wasn't as glamorous as I thought. So I had a media law course that I was taking for my major. And I thought this is pretty interesting, and took the entrance exam and went to law school. So the background is I have no lawyers in the family, didn't know anything about law firms or law school. I literally just, oh, this is something I'll try. So I'm now out practicing at a pretty big law firm, and a couple of years in, and it's very transactional to me. I would get a project, I'd do it, I'd turn it in, go to the next project. And I had a pretty rough boss, and I had a big project I was working for him. There was another lawyer about 5 years my senior working on it. I did my part, turned it into the mid-level lawyer who turned it in. I'm going on my day. And then we get paged to our boss's office. And our boss was one of those really tough love, rough kind of boss, yeller screamer. And so you really don't like getting called to his office. And so I got called into his office with my colleague. He's on a phone call with about a dozen other people. And then he just starts yelling at us. And we pick up the fact that we had messed up on our project. It was a lot of financial stuff. I did bankruptcy law, insolvency law. So it was a restructure. The numbers mattered. And we had double counted. We had messed it up. But he starts yelling at us, says, these idiots are going to stay here all night until they get it right. So this is sort of the bad part of a horrible work experience. I'm thinking I'm going to get fired. I don't know what I can do, but we do get it done. We send it out. And I had drawn the short straw. We had a court hearing the next morning, and I had to pick up my boss to drive him to court. And it was about an hour and a half drive. It was a lot of silence to start with. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get through the hearing, and I'm going to be giving my, walking papers. But he paused after a little bit and apologized. He said, I shouldn't have yelled at you in front of other people. But the reason I was so aggravated, particularly as it related to you, not necessarily the other guy, was that I really see leadership in you. I see you have you can have a real impact in this profession and influence, but you got to step up and own your project. You got to own everything, not just rely on others, rely on me. And so it was actually something that launched me into figuring out, like, I needed to do this. I needed to be a leader. I needed to, what does that mean? How do I step up and how to influence others? So it was actually positive work experience that really grew out of a really significant failure. It's a little bit of my journey early on.
I won't lie. I mean, as much as I love that story, I saw that little red flag where you're like, I'm sorry I yelled at you in front of others. I'm like, wait.
Yeah, that's right. This is even a great leadership tip that I'm passing on today about how we did it. Although we ultimately really built a really close relationship, and I was fortunate his family asked me to speak at his funeral when he passed away. I mean, it was a real, but he had rough edges, and hopefully maybe I impacted him some as we built our relationship. But you're exactly right. A lot of red flags.
You had witnesses? That's the problem?
Right.
So it's so funny because, I mean, from my own experience, I've been in organizations where I've had leaders go into the common area and yell for somebody, or be in another office 2 doors down and yell to get somebody's attention. They're not doing it maliciously, even though obviously your example, probably not the word idiots might be the best way to frame things, but they don't know any better. Like it's literally they're in it. they're feeling their emotions and they don't know how to either regulate or they don't know how to understand what situational awareness or self-awareness are. So I often comes up on the show is I feel bad for leaders because they don't know better. Like they've never been shown better or modeled better. As you say, transactional isn't a way to model relationship. It's a way to get a product done or a service provided, not help the organization.
Yeah.
So this leads me into our conversation because I don't know how well the law industry is good at this stuff from the outside looking in. Never
Right.
worked in a law office. Surprise, surprise. So before we get into any of that, I need you to define a few things for me because I really want to do it from your perspective,
Sure.
especially from the inside. How do you define leadership?
Yeah.
If
That's
you're
yeah. Go
because you
ahead.
come into a traditional environment and you're here to change it, so what are you looking to achieve?
Yeah, and it's a really great question generally, and then just a little bit about particularly what people in the U.S. they call big law, like big law firms where almost 700 lawyers and another 600 employees. So in a lot of offices, it's a very flat organization, and our owners are we call them shareholders. Some law firms call them partners, depending on the structure. Uh, any one of them can walk out the door with their clients any day to get a better offer. So it's very much not command and control and top down. It's got to be really building buy-in, and that's what culture becomes so critical as a differentiator. But to answer your question, I mean, so then tipping into this role about 5.5 years ago, it is all about building relationship leadership to me in this setting is building relationships, um, uh, building influence, and being able to help impact others. But I only do that if I'm authentic, if they trust me that I'm out looking out for their best interest and of course the best interest of the firm. And then I listen and that I take advice, maybe not all of it. And then when I make mistakes, admit it. I mean, all of that is bundled up as a lot of words about leadership, but in the setting I'm in, it absolutely has to be building that trust and not just among that group of the folks who have the client relationships, but then I have to make sure that all of our colleagues see that they have a pathway here to have a success, have to accomplish their goals, even if they don't have a law degree, that we're all on this team together. I mean, there's a lot of buzzwords I'm probably saying, but it's really part of who I am and why I think we've been able to be pretty successful the last few years um, because everybody is a leader, meaning everybody has influence, whether they're dealing with external clients or internal clients. So a lot of words, but that's kind of how I think about it philosophically.
So you're saying the law experience you have is more of a flat organization. It's not as hierarchical. So it's the partners, owners, however, and everybody else is
Right.
basically how it's looked at. So it's hierarchical, but only kind of two levels. But then which on the outside looking in sounds, oh great, everybody's equal, everybody's. But then you use words like transactional leadership. So it's so funny that it sounds progressive in one way and sounds so archaic in another.
And then I try to break that down too, because I think you're right. Law firms, there tends to be historically, I'll say, and I can only talk about what I know, and this is not us, but historically in the law firm, there is the lawyers and the non-lawyers, and I kind of think of non-lawyer phrase as a four-letter word because everyone is valuable, and particularly people who are professionals in business, in finance, in professional development, in pricing. They don't teach you that in law school. So we need to make sure that those business professionals have a seat at the table. So even in that hierarchy of the individuals who have law degrees, who are generating revenue by serving clients, we got to bridge that gap to make sure it's not, hey, you work for me, you do what I say. It's got to be, we've got to listen to our professionals. It's just, it's challenging. Maybe it's progressive, but what I really try to show is how can we, if we're doing this with a purpose, we can help connect the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish, helping our clients in some instances change the world, and we can help train you up in your skill, whatever area you are, receptionist, legal secretary, whatever, you're invaluable. We try to break down those barriers, but it's not, you can go too far on the spectrum, right? And then everyone has a voice and then decisions are never made and all of that stuff. So it's just, it's a balance, I think.
So what is leadership's role? Because in most organizations, there is a bit of a hierarchy. So you're like, okay, I look on the organizational chart, you're there, you must be in a leadership role.
Right.
But if you're telling me there's kind of two levels really to this, How is leadership defined within that sort of flat organization beyond obviously the upper tier? And what is their role in shaping culture?
Yeah, there's definitely, I report to our board, which the board does have to be comprised of individuals who have law degrees. And it's a 13-person board. They selected me and I report to them. So there is that accountability.
Right.
And then I have some direct reports at sort of the executive level, a chief operating officer who runs sort of the practice management function, chief finance officer, things like that. But I think in our firm for sure, and probably most law firms, but I know our firm, one of my if I said three priorities I have every day is driving the firm culture starts with me. And so that has to be walking the halls when I go visit offices and sitting in offices and listening to people and finding out what's obstacles they're having to do in their job. Meeting in town halls when I'm in an office with the business services and support staff and listening, doing video conferences just so they can get to know me and that kind of thing. It is interesting because it's hard to find every business, everyone you talk to says culture is, we're have the best culture, right? Workplace culture. And and different cultures are going to be, or different companies can have different types of culture. And the indicia of culture are kind of what I think are important, like people having a voice, professionals having a voice in the seat at the table, and respect and dignity, and being open to listening to ideas and trying to get better every day. And that's something I have to lead. Humility, talking about my mistakes, talking about that I have every about 4 6 weeks, I talk to a counselor, therapist, just because I want to make sure I'm keeping myself healthy for the firm. And so that all of those little things, indicia, I think help drive culture, importance of diversity, inclusion, equity, all of that. I think it's just something we work at, and we do it with relationships and with who we are, I think.
All the things that are a healthy culture, a healthy organization, but you're also trying to bring it into an organization that is not known to welcoming new ideas and new ways of working. How did that shift happen, or how are you still on that journey of that shift?
Still on the journey. Yeah, our CFO has a saying. He says, "Never lose an opportunity. Lose a crisis. Use a crisis to have an opportunity to make change." Or whatever. I can't remember exactly what he's saying, but that idea that when you are in a challenging situation, people are more open to maybe change. But so when I came into the role, we've been plateaued financially for a while, for 4 or 5 years, and I think the industry had too. But we had, and there was a real urgency about, and when I was in transition, we had our worst fiscal year end in a long time. So there's a real urgency that we have to do something. So that enabled us to, I talk about this idea of best run business principles. Like law firms traditionally hadn't been run as a business. It was more this partnership type thing. I'm saying generally, some were obviously. And so we had to think of, and where that shows up is things like having expectations. What does it mean to be a shareholder? What does it mean to be an associate? What are our expectations? How are we going to hold ourselves accountable? How are we going to elevate expectations over time? And then a lot of business hygiene, in our world, getting time entered, getting bills out, following up with clients, all the basic stuff that companies do all the time. So some of that helped us build some momentum. And so one of the answers about how we've been able to do it is that then when things are going better, they see these folks, they're trying some things that are working. So that helps, but it's your Herculean change management. And then you get into that whole line of Potter and all that stuff about how do you do that. And it's hard. I mean, we were talking with leaders of another firm recently just to kind of compare notes and see what we could learn from each other. And we were talking about that. Our change tends to, at Baker Donelson tends to be more incremental because lawyers are skeptical, as we talked about before we came on the line, more than the general populations. Even with now 3 or 4 years of really record success, it's still the skepticism, and we can make change, but it has to understand the why, and we have to talk through it, and we have to go through some rocky parts of it. To then it becomes, oh, why haven't we been doing that forever? So it's a journey for us for sure.
I remember hearing a saying of what was the most instrumental thing and catalyst for change for your health to become a more healthy organization? Your executive? Nope. Your HR department? Nope. The pandemic? Yep.
And that was part of it too, because then after we were able to get some stuff turning around from the financial plateau, then pandemic hit, right? And again, another crisis and way to rethink how we do things, and it helped us get healthy. So you're exactly right, Russell. And now you're post that, and then we're like, we've got we probably have a list of 6 or 8 initiatives, things that we know we can do to get better. Utilization management's one that's kind of we're thinking about, but then wholesale, that's going to be a big change to how people think about managing the practice. And we can't just switch that overnight. So it's going to have to be very staged.
What is utilization management? What is that as yeah.
Yeah, it's really getting in the weeds of how we have, like I said, almost 700 lawyers. And if you have, let's say you have 100 younger lawyers, associates is what we call them. And some of those associates have full plates of work plus more. They're killing themselves. And then maybe you have others for a variety of reasons. They had a case settle or whatever, aren't as busy. And we do this in general big business. Is there a way that you more centralized, probably more on a team or a smaller team basis, the workflow, using some software to see who's slow, who has some capacity, who doesn't, so that the work doesn't always just flow to Joe or Sally, who is your go-to person. Maybe John has some ability to take on some of that, so you balance out the workflow. And then, of course, by doing that, it helps you become more profitable because you don't have people who aren't hitting their performance metrics and things like that. Our COO and our CFO have been really testing it, but that's sort of that concept. But that's a big different than just shareholder saying to your point earlier, "Hey, get in my office. Here's another project," to the person who's right next door.
And that sounds great. I also there's the back of me, the leadership communications person back of me going, that also sounds very Big Brother. That also sounds like a way of really micromanaging people.
Right. No, and that was exactly my comment. I said the exact same thing. I said, this sounds, how do we, because it does make you more effective. You're better serving clients, that you can get work done. I mean, there's all kinds of positives. And I'm not sitting here selling. I don't have any stock in software management companies, but it is. I mean, it's a culture shift. It's a change. I guess it follows on nowadays in the legal industry. I know we've talked a lot about legal industry, is people don't graduate, and maybe this is true across the board, but I just know my industry. People don't graduate high school or college and say, "I want to be a legal secretary," right? That's just not, and it's so we have a workforce that's more folks on the retiring end than coming into the pipeline. A lot of smart people have built out software type ways to help manage workflow among legal support coordinators, is what we call them, but legal secretaries, so that maybe 5 secretaries can manage work of 25, 30 lawyers if it's through a workflow type thing.
Right.
And they have to understand. So typically you do that with a practice, like a corporate practice. So those 5 professionals really get to know the type of work, but then it evens out the flow. So it helps us. And we've implemented that. It makes it much more efficient. We have a group in our Nashville office that calls themselves the Fab Five because it just worked really well. But that's still a little Big Brother, but it's making us serve clients better. So I don't know. It's the world we live in, I guess, right?
No, and it's a fair point. And I've been to a few conferences lately that talk about AI to some degree, where you've got some people touting AI like it's the second coming and it's the best thing that's ever happened. And the other end going, we're losing our humanity in this. If
Yeah.
we don't, technology is great and technology should be absolutely used. But if we only rely on technology because technology is biased, because
Right.
it's created by human beings.
Right.
So as long as it's tempered within an environment of compassion, empathy, true leadership,
Right.
any technology can be great, but also technology can be horrible based on the leadership that's implementing it and how it works.
Right. And then there's a whole nother level when you talk about AI and the legal, because as you said, I mean, there's bias in the data that AI spits out. It also spits out stuff that's not accurate just because it's finding the best possible thing. And there's already been headlines of lawyers who have cited things in briefs on cases that don't exist and getting called on it because they relied on it. So I agree. We have to harness it for the good while and I totally agree. Maintaining the empathy and the compassion, and then we can better serve clients. But it's a new world out there.
So something that's not a new world is the perception of work-life balance and burnout when it comes to lawyers. So I was looking at a survey, Clio's put a survey out in 2018. So this was pre-pandemic, their legal trends report. 75% of lawyers frequently or always work outside of business hours. So that's pretty much all business hours. 75 people are doing it. That is business hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, 39% of lawyers saying that those extended hours negatively impact their personal lives. Now, this tended to lead to more pressure on attorneys for long hours. Burnout is the norm, very little work-life balance. Prestige is the goal. That's it. That is the goal, is the prestige. Now, that's from the outside looking in, that's always the assumption of what being a lawyer is. So my question to you is, if you're coming in here and trying to make change, trying to make change in an environment where this is the life. This is what the TV shows and the movies tell us this is,
Right.
right? But at the same time, you also have probably the old guard going, this is how it always is. It should be, because everybody's got to pay their dues, and don't want to change because they had to go through it as the boomers or the Gen Xers.
Right.
How do you approach that from a perception and a generational issue?
Yeah, a great question, and we're working through it. You're correct, and one part, the pressure and the stress of the profession is also dictated by the clients, and that's who we're serving, and so they're not turning off their phones at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. I mean, a lot of the working over those hours. So we have to serve clients, and one our vision, our Baker vision, is to become better trusted advisors to our clients. Nothing new in that, but there's things you can do to do that. You have to be responsive, right? So yeah, you've got that pressure from the client that does pay the bills. You've got, I talked earlier about rising expectations of what we require of each other to try to continue to grow the firm and to get better. And then you've got the compassion and the empathy of our colleagues who are really struggling. And the statistics have only gotten worse as far as lawyers struggling with mental health wellness issues, burnout, substance abuse, alcoholism, divorce. I mean, those are all over the national averages of other professions. So it's a balance, and it's a lot of the disciplines, and we talk a lot about that. And so we've implemented some things to try to help folks manage that, including we've launched what we call Baker, because we're Baker Donelson. Everything is Baker something, Baker Vision, Baker, but it's access to counseling. I mean, in addition, we have the EAP and Employee Assistance Program that I think most organizations do. But then we tried to elevate it with very specific, almost concierge type consulting work, access to consultants who can help, and therapists who can help, even if it's something with your child. That's another big stressor. Our young lawyers or associates, we have, they get direct counseling with a couple therapists that have actually come and spoken to our firm. They want, and we've rolled it out across all business services and professionals. And we talk about it. I've talked about it. I talk about that. I need that check-in every 4 to 6 weeks. And so a lot of it is just trying to raise the consciousness that we got to take care of ourselves first to be able to then show up best for our clients and for our colleagues. So we continue to get better at that, and we try to learn from that. But the other piece you've mentioned is the old guard and saying you have to do this. The generational shift is an interesting dynamic because we have to balance it, and we have to try to help work through that, because the young lawyers won't stay here if they don't want old school. Many of them don't even want to be shareholders or partners anymore. So we're working on, are there alternate pathways that somebody may want to take less work, less stress? The stress, again, it's somewhat dictated by the industry and the clients. So that maybe you can't take less stress, but maybe less hours to give you more time away. And then we try to be intentional. Some people, it just isn't the right profession for them, particularly in a big law firm where there are these heightened expectations, and try to help them with placement in other places. So it's a multifaceted approach, but I'm not saying we've got it all together, because it's just something we're learning from every day and trying to get better at it.
You make an interesting point too, and this could be, and maybe, I don't think it's every industry might be like this, but certainly I understand the law industry being like this, is you said you've said it a few times, it's dictated by the client. So there's one thing to say employees first, but when you say it's the client who's dictating everything, it's not employee first.
Yeah.
Because if you give the therapy and the support and the counseling, that's a reactive measure, not a proactive measure.
Right.
Proactive measure is, I turn my phone off at 8. I don't take phone calls. Like, it is setting boundaries. It is, but again, I can say all that all I want. I don't work in the law industry. That is not my world. But I can imagine there are some new associates or new people coming up going, that's how I want to work. Why is the client determining whether I work or don't work on the weekends? Where are my boundaries? How are you handling that?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I would say, I mean, if we had a toxic client, I mean, we have fired clients. I mean, so I don't want to think like we just, that we would do that. But particularly the pandemic showed it. I mean, clients had all hours of the day and night trying to deal with what do we do with all this stuff going on. I'll say I try to again lead by example. I talk a lot about. I take a digital Sabbath, I call it. I just learning from some of my colleagues that do it more on their sort of the Jewish faith. But like Saturday at 5 to Sunday at 5, I try to shut off my phone and digital stuff and not interact on work. And my colleagues know that. I've said that. And so now again, somebody could text me and our COO and others, know how to get me if I need to. And I do try to shut off the phone at 8 o'clock. So I try to lead by example, but I'm also not directly serving clients right now. I think communication is a big part of it. We talk about build that communication with your client. I think a lot of clients are big companies are struggling with the same thing, and they're trying to work on boundaries. So I think having that healthy discussion with them is important, and that does work. I mean, if you can get to that position, I guess the point more about that is that at some level, even if you could shut it off at 8 and you had 24 hours over the weekend, it's still big law companies, big corporations that we're serving. Their issues don't stop, right? So it's again, a lot of this is a balance, but.
And also you're dealing with as a global organization, you're dealing with different time zones. And that is a
Right.
huge factor because it doesn't stop anymore. How do you manage that?
Well, we don't do as much globally, but I
Right.
think we do have a global practice, and they're dealing with that for sure all the time.
I think I might know the answer to this, but I'm super curious because you're a comms guy as well, which does my heart very, very proud. What do you feel has been the most effective from someone who's trying to be shifting culture and move into a new area of understanding around leadership and what cultures could be? What do you feel has been some of the most effective? I don't like to get tactics into this, but really, what has sort of been a superpower or a secret weapon for you that's been most effective? Because you're dealing with diversity, generational, cultural diversity, and the fact that this is a different industry than maybe others are used to. So what's been some secret weapons for you?
Yeah, and I always talk about like all my good ideas come from somewhere else, and I just try to modify it for what we did. But somewhere early on, when I was in my transition to be CEO, I'd read about some CEO that had did like a weekly 5-minute video to their organization just to let them know these are some things that are coming and changes. And so again, under this umbrella of I called it Baker Neck when I was first getting in the role, because my predecessor had been in the role 20 years, and now we're really thinking about what's next. And he had done a great job. And I did a weekly video, and that was a lot of talking about, so that would help the folks get to know me, know what we were driving. But then where it got accelerated was in the pandemic. We didn't set out that we were going to start doing daily videos, but it ended up, particularly in that March 2020, every day there was something else we needed to let our people know. So I was doing these daily videos, and we ended up doing about 450 daily videos, not on the weekend. And ultimately others joined in, so it wasn't just me writing and doing it every day. But that became a pretty big linchpin of culture because our COO did a 5 on Friday with questions people had submitted during the week. And then the 5th one was always something personal about her. So that it got like, it really helped build that who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. And so that really did help. And now it's interesting because then over time, realized people aren't really watching them as much. And so then we backed it off to weekly, and now we do it every other week. And I still wonder whether we should do it a little bit, more often. But anyway, that's one example. And the other thing I will say is maybe it was a tactic, but it was just because I think this builds out culture and authenticity and trying to live out what you talk about when you talk about culture. A big part of who we are is the leaders going around to different offices. We're in 23 offices across like 12 states. And so being in an office is important. And so I'm on the road a lot, or COO's on the road a lot, but during COVID, we couldn't do it. So when we finally started lifting all that stuff, we put together a Tim and Jennifer's Grateful for You tour, and we went together to all the offices back to back to back, almost like a concert tour. And we got tie-dyed t-shirts and put the tour dates on the back, and it was all Grateful Dead type stuff, which I'm not necessarily a Deadhead, but I mean, it was fun. But that was just another example of people getting to know who we were, and we're letting our hair down, so to speak, while we're still driving forward. Those are a couple things we've done to try to live it out.
How do you know it's landing? Because I know, I mean, it's a traditional organization. You come in with tie-dyed, and there's some people just rolling their eyes.
Oh, of
and
course.
other people are like, finally, I've seen you on videos. I've never seen you in person before, and they're rolling out some red carpet. How do you know it's working?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Russell, because it is. I mean, it's to some extent, everyone's going to say it's working or hitting if they're talking to me, right? Because oh, I love how you do this, and they could be like snickering behind your back. Oh, that's not generally our culture, but they do roll their
Right.
eyes, I'm sure, about some of the stuff that I talk about, and I think first of all, it's the financial and engagement. We track engagement and firm brand and things like that towards our vision. Those are all increasing and doing well. So people see that it's working. And then I think they give you a little bit more. So I think it is working because the vision's built on some of this stuff that maybe they say, oh, it's consultant speak or whatever, but it's just practical, building trusted advisors. So I think people that helps get more buy-in. And then maybe the eyes don't roll quite as much because they say this is working and that's just Tim. But I think it all comes back to that's authenticity too. Some
Yeah.
of it is who I am and who our COO is. And we may not be the best person to lead this firm, in a couple of years, but for this 5 years that we've been doing it right now, we've been the person that authenticity has come through and get people to believe and have confidence. I mean, some of it you can test the tactics. I mean, is the viewership of the videos going way down? Are people
Right.
not coming to our town halls that we do? Our engagement surveys have gone up the last 3 years in all categories, and so you would look for some trends there. Now we get feedback in addition to they can check the 1 through 5 rating, but then they give feedback and we act on that and talk about it. But I think you would see some red flags. But I also know what happens. I get eye rolls.
You touched on something that I find to be one of the strongest secret weapons that not enough organizations do, which is tying things to vision. Vision is probably one of the most effective communication tools executive and leadership can use, and yet nobody does it. It's amazing how we're like, oh, the leadership, the vision, oh, it's on the wall. Oh no, it's on the
Right.
website, but nobody could recite it. Nobody
Right.
knows what it actually
Yeah.
is.
And
But
you're not
to
living it
harken
out.
back,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. How have you used vision as a way of change and cultivating culture?
Yeah. So we did. So first, it was really this Baker Next, and we had to be thinking like a best run business and some of that. So it was really just communicating it and then trying to keep the drumbeat going and connecting the why to it. But in
Mm.
2022, in April, we launched Baker Vision 2028, the longer term strategy of who we wanted to become. And so it's the cadence of communication. I mean, you've heard that. I've been talked about. If you say something over and over again till you to depth of it, of saying it, you're probably only about 40% of the way there. Just so we try to make sure it infuses
Yep.
everything. And what I do, because I know you do this, you love this too about telling the stories. We tell the story of Baker Vision, like telling the story of whether it's a lawyer or someone without a law degree who's embracing this idea of being trusted advisor because it is inclusive of the entire firm. Because you need to build trusted relationships in the office, whether you ever see an external client. So we do the drumbeat of like why this is important. We come behind it with skill building. I called it, people made fun of me like a trusted advisor mini MBA. Because I mean, MBAs are pretty big deals. And I don't mean to suggest that that's the kind of depth of training, but we're trying to help people get better at it. And then we have a charter and we try to test. If we're going to make a decision about something, is it something that follows what we're trying to accomplish with the vision? Yes or no? That's making our decisions. And then I've mentioned have some measures, some financial measures, engagement. What does the industry think about us? Because I think our national brand will go up if we're becoming better trusted advisors. It's not a guaranteed thing, but that is an indicia that we are building our brand if CEOs and general counsel recognize us more. And it's all on a 2-page charter that we talk about. And every meeting we have starts with a 1 slide that's kind of a summary of the vision. And I try to bring examples of people who are building trusted advisors in industries and things like that. It's a whole plan, though. You're right, Russell. You can't just put it in the desk drawer. And we had somebody help us build out that charter because it was an expert in it because it's a talent that not many people have.
You have to operationalize it. You
Yeah.
have to. I mean, you made the cliche of the charter that's on the folder just above the garbage icon on your
Right.
desktop. You never
Yes.
look at it. We have
Right.
one. I think we put it 3 years ago, and that is so common. And yet we spend so much money and much effort for a couple of months to create something that we then ignore
Right.
for, yeah, until we want to redo it again. So I
Because
love
now you
the
got,
operational.
yeah. we're gonna go do something new, and everyone gets excited, and then it goes in the desk drawer again. I totally agree, and that's one piece I didn't mention. Like our chief operating officer, she has each of the business units. We call them departments, but business
Right.
units. They've built out their own plan of how they're executing on Baker Vision 2028 and what they're doing, and then they're held accountable to that. That book, Playing to Win by Lafley, I think he talks about how you have to cascade it down, and it doesn't just not just the firm, it's to the business units, and then the individuals have to understand their part of it, and then it's like a circle.
If an employee doesn't see themselves in the vision and mission, why are they
Right.
there? Why they're they're there to punch a clock and not really contribute to the level of what's needed for business outcomes and the vision for
Right.
the organization.
And then there's a whole nother discussion which we'll get into about, because I mean, I'm not suggesting that it's the right length. There's reasons why we did like a 5.5 year deal, but
Right.
now we're in year 3. How, and like we came into this year saying that we're going to double down on these core principles because they're working, but we want to double down to have greater impact. And so this year's been talking about the greater impact you individual can have in living out these Baker Vision principles, right? So you have to keep it fresh when you're kind of in the wilderness between the start, the launch, and the end, I think.
And I think it's and I understand. So in my brain, I'm thinking a vision never changes, right? A
Yeah.
vision shouldn't be 3 or 5 years. It should be the always North Star. And a mission is the three
Well,
to 5 years. But whatever works for you, man. It's just
right. No,
it's
that's true.
name things
There's
what you
yeah.
want.
No, I totally agree. You're right. I mean, you got to have the North Star. That guides any, that trumps what we call vision. Others may be missions. I totally agree.
I have an interesting question because again, this is outside looking in. Transparency is not something the law institutions have been known for and the reason I say that is not it's a risk aversion thing.
Mm,
It's not anything to do with, oh, we
totally
don't
agree.
want to be transparent. We just have 17 books of legal precedent that we have to can't say nothing because we might get in trouble one day. Like we get it in other industries, but the law industry is so about that. So, how has that restrictiveness, or maybe not restrictiveness, impacted a lot of this around transparency? How do you tackle that?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think there's two aspects of that because you're exactly right. I mean, as a profession, there are precedents, that cases from 200 years ago that still guide some of the law, maybe even more than that, right? Now I'm getting kind of a flashback to those horrible days in law school of these principles I did no idea and understand, but I don't even know what they mean today. But I had to study them. So there is that, and it is. I mean, that's the profession, and there are some barriers to entry and all of that, and we could unpack whether that's good or bad or not. But then within law firms, there's a wide disparity of even transparency within a particular culture. So we're overly transparent. Every shareholder can see everyone else's compensation and how they're performing on their metrics and everything. There is a young lawyer or business services professional wouldn't see all that, but we're wildly, but they can look at all their financial performance of their own and all that stuff. Some firms are what people call black box. They set compensation and everything with a smaller committee, and you don't know what everyone else makes. We have a lot of people involved in like our compensation setting. So our culture has been that we're very transparent. We're very open. We don't try to hide the ball. Like it showed up again during COVID when we're doing these videos just to say, okay, this is where we are financially. I mean, we do report how we're doing financially to all the firm in town halls that I do and go through our financials. But I think that's what different firms choose what works for
Mhm.
them. So different aspect.
So, if you're trying to shift a culture that has been traditional for so long, not only traditional in itself, but also people come in with a lot of baggage and assumptions as to what working for a law firm will be, how
Yeah.
do you hire for culture fit? If somebody's coming to an organization and they're just out of law school going, I'm going to work 97 hours this week. Like they know that's what they're assuming. Meanwhile, you're talking about all this transparency and different ways of working and how do you align those?
Yeah, it's a whole lot of different things, and again, we try to live it out, and I always tell people, if what we say is not what you're experiencing, call me on it because we need to figure that out and we get better at it. But there's a lot of different. So if it's somebody who is a more senior attorney who's at another firm, who's got that book of business, then they want to walk across the street. Some of it is just getting to know them, and really, we've got some stuff on paper, but then also in these meetings that maybe I meet with them or our chief growth officer does, really unpacking what our culture is. And it's not going to be the culture that everyone wants to live in. I mean, for sure, you got to figure out. So many law firms are doing incredible work for incredible clients, but there's different cultures. So we try to show that in that setting. In new lawyers coming out of law school, the legal industry has this very robust summer associate program where folks after their first and second year of law firm come for 6 to 10 weeks and work. Now it's not like the stress and the pressure of when you start as a full-time employee because there's parties, you're trying to get to know people in the social setting, but they do have work and they can have a lens into what's going on around the firm.
Right.
And then I think same on the business professional side at the sort of more senior level, you're going to have interactions with a lot of other executives or leaders in the firm to try to see whether you fit with the culture. So it's very, I mean, obviously, and you know this, I mean, it's a waste of money to hire somebody that's a bad fit. So you try to
Right.
do that in a lot of different ways. We've not gone to that. I know some firms, law firms, I know other organizations use like testing to see if people fit within the certain parameters, like psychological testing or personality test. We've not done that yet. We've looked at it. We've wondered about whether that would help us, but so we try to test it a lot and be open about who we are, and it's not going to be the right fit for everyone. And it
Yeah, I'm
isn't
always
always when
nervous.
they come, right? I mean, then you have to make the hard decision, but
Fair. And I'm always nervous about this personality test because it's, oh, you want just one type of person working here,
right.
or
No, that's why, yeah.
do you want some diversity and different ways of thinking? Because you can't use the word innovation in one sentence and then say we want this type of person only working here in the other sentence.
Yeah, no, totally. That's why we've steered away from it. I mean, the Baker of Baker Donelson is Senator Howard Baker, who was well known. People still write about him, about how he always viewed, like, he was a politician, chief of staff to, I guess, Ronald Reagan. He was very involved in the Watergate. I think he asked the question about who knew what, when, or whatever. That's kind of famous, big politician. But his whole focus on life was like, the other person may be right. I want to sit down across the aisles in that political world, but in anything, and understand and get better because we have different views. And yeah, that I totally agree that's why I think I personally have steered away and from trying to do those tests because you do want diversity of opinion.
It's funny. We say that and then we know the world we live in. So I'm like, it almost
Well,
sounds quaint.
it does. That's why he still
Yeah.
gets cited. I mean, it's interesting. People say, "Oh, we long for the days of Senator Baker or I can't remember, like Senator Daschle or Senator Dole, or things like that, that people could really come together and talk." And
Yeah, that's not an America thing. That's not a Canadian thing. That's a global thing. So yeah, no, I
yes,
totally
right.
hear that. So I want to flip it from the new hires to people that have been around for a while. And I know we sort of touched on the generational thing. Some people don't want to change. Some people have
Right.
been through so much change in the last 5 years. They're like, I don't want to change one more thing. And you're coming in here, Tim, and telling me that this is going to be a new way of working for a traditional organization that works for me. Why would I want to change anything? When you look leadership that might be resistant, and when I say resistant, I mean a roadblock. They are not interested in changing at all. How do you address, and I don't want to say bad leadership, because that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad leader. They
All right.
just are too rigid for any kind of change management. How do you
Yeah.
approach that?
Yeah, I guess the one way I've done it is again, it maybe very practical, but and it hasn't always worked. But I loved, Churchill did what they call dinner table diplomacy. There's actually a book that talked about how he would use the dinner table with opposing leaders and opposing politicians and view people to try to. Said once you got around and you were eating a good meal, and in his case, drinking a lot of whiskey and
Yeah.
smoking cigars, which I don't, not smoking cigars, but that you would get to know the person and could really unpack the why and understand. And then also you could share why you think this is a good thing. And it doesn't always come out like you come out with a big accord to end the war or anything like that. But I like dinner table diplomacy. You get to know people and really understand what's driving them, what makes them tick, what's their journey. I mean, I think we talked about that earlier, about that's really vital about where you've come in your career. Or my boss that you said to me, when I learned, like the boss I talked about who had yelled at me, I don't know, he didn't, may not have had those role models, right? He may have had, I try to use that and then build that trust and then try to take a small step, and it doesn't always work. And we've got a few people who kind of refuse to change, but then when they see what we're accomplishing and they want to try to get a part of it, then they have to kind of moderate a little bit, take advantage of some of the resources. And then in some cases, we've had instances of people that we couldn't really change and they were really toxic. And we had to ask them, in a compassionate way, work through, professionally exiting the firm, which it was hard when they've got a big book of business, but you just have to do that to be true to what you're trying to drive. So those are some things I've tried to do on that. but it's just a constant daily step, and you have to work at it.
I love that you ended our conversation by talking about the importance of relationships, Tim. Weird.
I
Weird.
know. But that's why I love your program, because it's so beneficial, because that's the key of everything. It really is. I mean, it's what gets me up in the morning. It's not, I mean, it's not the fact that we're driving increased financial performance and stuff. It's our people, and it's those relationships. And people say, "Well, you should get exhausted. You're on the road all the time." And I have to have downtime. I have to refuel. I got to find my own kind of, but I love being around our people. I mean, it really just gets me energized. And so it's all about relationships at work.
I love that. If I didn't have one more question to ask you, Tim, I'd be like, let's end it there.
Mic
That's
drop,
perfect.
right?
So, Tim, to wrap it up, what is one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
It's something I was actually doing this morning. I thought about it. I really love writing really notes of thank you to people around our firm. It's so simple, but that just short note of appreciation. I mean, it can be a word passing in the hall, but just a handwritten note seems to have. I mean, it seems quaint going back, but I know when I have a desk drawer of notes that people have written me over the years. And when things are hard, I'm having a really bad, terrible, no good day, whatever that book is, I pull out that list and just start the packet and start reading it. So I would encourage everyone, write a note of gratitude to somebody, just thanking them for what they're doing or how they impacted you. It would be really powerful, I think.
That is Tim Lupinacci. He is the chairman and chief executive officer of Baker Donelson, one of the largest law firms in the U.S. Thank you so much for being here, Tim.
It's been great, Russell. I could keep talking.